Election Day 2024 has arrived. The anticipation has been building up. The wait now is over. Millions of Americans heading towards polling stations to decide the future of America. The race to elect the next U.S. president is razor tight. We've been telling you about this, with the voters set to make a choice between the Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. In a final appeal, Harris and Trump made their closing arguments to the American people, basically highlighting the sharp contrast in their visions. Listen in.
With your vote tomorrow, we can fix every single problem our country faces and lead America, indeed the world, to new heights of glory.
And the momentum is on our side. Our campaign has tapped into the ambitions, the aspirations, and the dreams of the American people. And we know it is time for a new generation of leadership in America.
Harris, remember, has championed abortion rights and promised to lower food and housing costs for working families. And Trump, on the other hand, has vowed to secure the border and proposed massive tax cuts in order to stimulate the economy. And the polls showing the race as a dead heat, with Donald Trump basically vowing a triumphant return to the White House, while Harris declares momentum is on their side. Now, both the candidates held last-minute rallies in crucial battleground states, with Harris finishing her campaign in Pennsylvania, rallying in Philadelphia at the iconic Rocky Steps.
Are we ready to do this? Are we ready to vote? Oh, it's good to be back in the city of brotherly love, where the foundation of our democracy was forged. And here at these famous steps, a tribute to those who start as the underdog and climb to victory.
Trump, who is 78, is the oldest nominee ever. He closed his campaign in Grand Rapids, Michigan, accompanied by family members, though notably missing his wife, Melania.
The ball's in our hand. All we have to do is get out the vote tomorrow. You get out the vote, they can't do anything about it. We win. Just so you know, if we show up, they can't win. They can't. They mathematically can't win because they're so far behind.
Voters in the U.S. hamlet of Dixfield Notch launch Election Day with a tied vote, mirroring the incredibly close national polls in the White House race. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump each got 3 ballots in the tiny community in the northeastern state of New Hampshire. Now, as the undecided voters hold the power in a way to sway the critical swing states, their votes will be crucial when it comes to deciding the outcome. These voters, remember, are a mix of sporadic voters, disenchanted partisans, independents, could end up tipping the scales in states like Pennsylvania, even Georgia. With over 82 million Americans already having cast early ballots, the turnout is record-breaking. As polling stations buzz with activity, the nation is holding its breath, knowing that today's decision could end up fundamentally reshaping America's landscape and could send ripples across the global political landscape as well. And with us on the broadcast this minute are our correspondent Susan Teherani with us from New York and Siddhant Sibal with us from Washington, D.C. We also have political analyst Chris Blackburn with us from London. Coming to you first, Susan, we've been talking about how crucial the next set of hours will be, not just for America, but beyond. Give us a better sense of what the last pitch for both the candidates has really looked like. If you can zoom in and tell us what the swing states will actually hold for the two candidates.
Yeah, the million-dollar question. Good morning to you and all our viewers from outside a polling station here in New York City, where Voting has officially begun. It began about 45 minutes ago at 6 a.m. local time, and you can see people coming in and out early morning, perhaps before going to work, to get their votes in if they hadn't voted early. It's a very crucial time right now. We did learn that there were a lot of people across the United States who decided to vote early, but we also know that more than 80 million people are going to be voting on voting day, which only means that this election is basically anything but decided. Of course, those crucial states, the swing states, are going to be at play because of the makeup of our electoral college here in the United States. They're going to be the determining factor. But nonetheless, we can't underestimate the popular vote, and we can't underestimate any surprises.
Indeed. Speaking of the undecided voters and to what extent they will actually play a role in this election, Siddhant, for our viewers, if you can just outline what you're picking up on the ground at this point.
Well, here in Washington, D.C., of course, polling has started now. Essentially, when it comes to undecided voter, they are like the swing states. Nobody knows exactly where they vote, and that is the essential moot point of the entire election process. The 7 states and the voters who are undecided, who decide who will be the next president of the United States. And we saw that when it comes to the campaigning, both the candidates, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, decided to spend their last hours of campaigning in swing states, especially in Pennsylvania, a state, of course, which is seen crucial in terms of the 19 electoral votes, electoral seats it has. But all in all, it is just around 6:39 a.m. here, local time in Washington, D.C. And essentially, it will be a long day, as not only the votes will be done, the ballot will be casted by the billions of Americans, but also the results and some indications will get known by the day ends, as the day ends. In fact, and also there is a big question exactly how the winner will be announced and how the person who lost will accept the defeat, because that's the big worry right now on the ground in terms of the security situation. Everyone clearly remembers what happened in January of 2021 here in this country, and nobody wants to take any chances. The authorities have activated every measure possible across Washington, D.C. You see number of fences going up, many roads have been blocked as well, especially leading up to the Harvard University.
Stay with me, Siddhant and Susan. Let's also get in Chris Blackburn onto the conversation. Chris, this, of course, is an election with far-reaching global implications. What is your assessment of the ways in which the impact of the election result will be felt beyond America's borders?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, these are amazing elections. I think we've seen some quite big, like, international elections. There's been elections in India and the UK. So this is really the end election, and it's very important because the United States is still a global superpower. Like, whether we like it or not, we know the sort of the power and economics are shifting sort of east, but the United States is still a massive heavy player. And I think that these elections have been, everybody's looking at the United States for a sort of a leadership, especially in Europe. And we're looking to see who will actually get the White House. So the ramifications are huge. We know that even though Kamala Harris has said that she wants to sort of be a major competitor with China and she wants to protect Taiwan, we've seen a more bullish and a more assertive sort of stance from Donald Trump. So a lot of nations are sort of looking at how and who will get into the White House, because it will have a massive effect. We will see things happening in Ukraine. There's obviously the conflict there with Russia and Ukraine has dragged in NATO powers. So President Trump has said that he will try to stop and end the war. And he also says he'll try to stop and end the war in the Middle East between Israel and the Palestinians, and also Iranian proxies in Lebanon. So this is going to be a massive thing for international affairs. And not only that, in the United States, that both candidates have said, if the other gets into power, this is effectively the end of democracy in America. And we've also seen 2 assassination attempts. So this presidential election itself has been phenomenal. Looking at it from a sort of a neutral spectator, it's got massive implications for the rest of the world and America.
Right, Susan, if I can just come to you to give us a better sense of what the turnout at this point has been looking like and what that really tells us.
Yeah, the turnout has been incredible. In some states like New York, it was unprecedented to have so many people go to the polls early and cast their ballots, notably in Brooklyn and Manhattan, of course, Queens as well, and other places across the New York City metropolitan area. But it's also important to note that early voting was nowhere close to what it was back in 2020. Remember, that was during COVID. People were more comfortable really being absent, having absentee ballots, or voting early to prevent from congestion at polling stations like the one behind me here. Nonetheless, people have been excited. I do want to say what's very interesting this year that we hadn't seen in previous years is that more Republicans went to vote early than Democrats. And voting early traditionally has been really something that Democrats have been more drawn to than Republicans. They prefer day of voting on election day. So that's also perhaps something that's been very different. But nonetheless, there are millions of Americans who haven't cast their ballots. And like I mentioned, that's what makes this today so important, because we still really don't know which way this election is going to go, despite the many polls.
Indeed, Siddhant, we've of course this time around once again seen a string of celebrities, high-profile figures making their stance clear in the run-up to the election. You've also been speaking to the people on the ground. If you can just in broad strokes tell us what your impression has really been like about the kind of outreach that has been made by the two camps to try and tap into the various demographic sets as well.
Well, the sense I have is that it is a very divided country. You go on the street, you find either Trump supporters and the Kamala Harris supporters, and both the sides are not willing to essentially hear the other side. There are segments in the country which are looking for a middle ground. There are segments who prefer some policies of Kamala Harris and some policies of Trump. But the divide is huge in this country. That is why this election is seen as pivotal in terms of deciding the course of the American future in many ways, what America decides. This morning here, and we will be going to polling centers as well and get a view about essentially what the voters have in their mind. But I have been speaking to many voters, and if you speak to a Kamala Harris supporter, they see Donald Trump as very dangerous to the country. But if you speak to a Kamala Harris supporter, to a Donald Trump supporter, they will say Kamala Harris is essentially leading the country to somewhere which is negative in terms of the policies of the Biden administration. And issues that are dominating essentially includes immigration. That's a very, very big issue here. Other than that, the other big issue is the economy. Many people find inflation as the biggest challenge for themselves, for the household, for the working of a household, and that is something that they want a reduction in. The cost of living is something that is dominating. But all in all, the other key issue that in terms of is not local, in terms of international, is the Gaza war. There are segments of population in Michigan which are of course concerned about that.
Right, Chris, speaking of the outreach that has been made by the two candidates, specifically talking about the Indian American community, Kamala Harris reminding the electorate about her Indian roots in that post that was sent out just yesterday as well. What is your impression of whether or not that actually strikes a chord with the community? Does that really help the two camps in the ways in which they have actually tried to woo the Indian American community in particular?
Yeah, you're right. Both candidates. I mean, Donald Trump, he put out a statement for Diwali, and he basically said that he wanted the Hindus to be protected in Bangladesh, and there's been massive sort of persecution after the fall of Sheikh Hasina there, and obviously then Kamala Harris plays to her sort of her heritage. So yes, we've seen both candidates reaching out to sort of the Hindu or the Indian voters, but America is divided, as Sibel has said. America, I think that, I know we say about the swing states, but I think America knows who it's gonna vote for. People have been entrenched for the last decade. I think as Trump became that candidate, and America has moved between highly polarized politics, people know who they're going to vote for, and these celebrity endorsements or reaching out to Hindu voters, I don't think really matters ultimately in the long run, because America is divided, and everybody's sort of apprehensive and anxious about what's actually going to happen going forward. Basically, Washington DC, there's parts of it have been locked down as if it's a war zone. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the next couple of days.
Indeed, all of those reasons why this election is all the more crucial and interesting. We're leaving it there for the moment. Chris, Susan and Siddhant, thanks very much for joining us on the broadcast this minute. To stay up to speed with the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.